Is Florida Senator and 2016 Republican presidential candidate Marco Rubio. Senator, nice to have you back on the program.
Thanks for having me back.
We expect to hear from the president after his meeting today, his briefing today on national security, and we've heard sweeping policy ideas from both the president and a lot, quite frankly, from candidates. Specifically today, Senator, if it was President Rubio that had to make a decision about what actions to take after the terror attack in San Bernardino, what would be the one thing that you would change to make us safer?
Well, it's more than one thing, and we have to focus both on homeland security and on defeating ISIS in where they are located in the Middle East. On the homeland security front, as I said, we need a top-down review of every single legal immigration program we have that could potentially be manipulated. For example, most Americans didn't even know there was such a thing as a fiancé visa. We know that ISIS deliberately tries now to recruit people like doctors or students to use those visas. It's why it's so disappointing that this Omni bill that's in place now does nothing to deal with that or with the Syrian refugees, which is the other thing we need to look at. We need to rebuild our intelligence capabilities here at home, especially in the face of homegrown violent extremists. For example, the San Bernardino killer, one of them was a U.S. citizen. We have people running for president now that have voted to diminish this program, to take away valuable tools that we need to get access to intelligence information.
Sure, but
then when it comes to
these
defeating
reviews,
them abroad,
if I could, just for a second before we move abroad, because I really like to focus domestically, the reviews that you're talking about could take months, they could even take years. And a lot of Americans think that things need to be done immediately. So what sort of time frame are you looking for to make those reviews and then make the changes?
No, it wouldn't. We know a lot of what we need to know already. For example, if you know that they're specifically targeting people like doctors and student visas, things you wouldn't normally think as terrorists, then you understand that our vetting process must be even deeper, and we need to err on the side of caution in allowing people into this country. We need to know more than we've ever known before about the people we're allowing into this country, particularly if they have any markers that might indicate that they could potentially be the kind of person that ISIS is recruiting. By the way, looking at their social media profiles, something this administration would not allow. And then as far as the Middle East is concerned, this is important. We need to continue to work towards putting together that coalition to defeat them on the ground, led primarily by Sunni Arab fighters on the ground, but it will need more special operators.
Well, and there seems to be some confusion, especially with the Saudi plan that was put forward earlier this week. I want to ask you a little bit about the omnibus spending bill. Your colleague, Senator Jeff Sessions, says when it comes to the provision for refugees, basically this bill approves without condition more refugee admissions and more taxpayer dollars to do that. You know,
that's right.
You know, that's a big deal. Every GOP senator or senator really has to approve this bill to move it forward, approve to move the bill forward, not necessarily approve the bill. So a senator could put a stop to this if they don't agree with it. My question is this a big enough issue for you that you would put a stop to this bill moving forward because it has this refugee provision in it?
I mean, you can slow it down. Ultimately, if they want to pass it, they're going to ram it down everyone's throat. And it's unfortunate. This is over $1 trillion in spending. It was put together at the last second. As it always happens, they know this has to be done. They wait till December to do it. There's one provision in the whole thing that's really important, which is it once again takes away the bailout fund for Obamacare, something I was able to achieve in the one last year, and then a bunch of really bad stuff, and you just mentioned one of them. This is why people are so frustrated with Washington. We know that this is a problem. We know that ISIS is trying to use the refugee program to infiltrate killers into the United States, and nothing's going to happen about it. They're going to approve basically the same program we have today, and people scratch their head and say, how can it be? How can Washington be so out of touch and so disconnected? And the anger is what's fueling a lot of what's happening in this campaign. People just shake their head and say, how can it be?
Well, we are going to have to take a quick commercial break. You are part of the group that's going to allow it to go through. We understand the point of it slowing down, and we understand that perspective. But the question about what to do next is a big one. I'll ask you that after this break. Back with us again, Florida Senator and 2016 presidential candidate Marco Rubio, and he's heading to town hall shortly, so we're going to wrap up our conversation, Senator. So just briefly recapping what we just talked about. On the one hand, you're telling us that we actually do know that ISIS is trying to use the refugee program to get into our country. On the other hand, you're telling us there's nothing that really can be done to stop this omnibus spending bill that expands the refugee program. So if you can't lead on this issue as a sitting senator, how can our viewers believe you'll do it as president?
Well, actually, we can do something about it. I didn't say we can't do anything about it. We can most certainly slow this process down and force them to go back and make changes to it. There's no doubt that we can, and we should, and we will. And I think there's an effort underway now among many conservatives in the Senate and in the House to make that happen. You can't slow this down. This is I mean, there is a way to do it. I think the question is whether the willingness is there. My point has been that consistently over the last few years, there comes a moment when the kind of establishment in Washington in both parties gets together, rounds up enough votes, and just rams this down people's throats. And look, this is a massive piece of legislation, over $1 trillion of spending. It was just announced, and and everyone now has to, in 48 hours, make a decision about what to do about it. I know enough to say we're going to oppose it, and I know enough to say that we should use every procedural aspect that we have to slow it down and perhaps force some changes on these things that we've been discussing.
That would be news if that's the case. What would be your role in slowing down the bill? How would you do it?
Well, again, I mean, they need what you can do ultimately is slow it down and make them take more days in order to pass it. If they've got sufficient number of votes, at the end they can always ram it down our throat. But I think if we can add some days to it, the way Senator Sessions is talking about, and maybe some others, that process of slowing it down allows more Americans to wake up to the reality of what's in the bill, and perhaps as a result demand that their elected representatives do something to make those changes on things like the Syrian refugees, which we're talking about now.
What would be the one change, only have 30 seconds here, you would make to the refugee program that would quickly help it? Well, can you give me one? Because I only have 30 seconds, and then we're going to be cut off.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think bottom line is on the Syrian refugees, we will probably not be able to admit most of them into the country. No matter how often you vet them, we just don't have enough information to vet them against. I would say that if there is a 7-year-old orphan or a well-known Chaldean priest, something that common sense shows us we know something about, you could make an exception. But by and large, this is an issue we have to be 100% right on. And until we have enough information to vet people with, we're not going to be able to allow people in, and that's what should be reflected in this bill.
That's a big concern of a lot of Americans. Senator, nice of you to join us on such a busy day. We always appreciate having you on and look forward to having you back. Thank you.